Welcome to Key Conversations, where you get to connect with the best of the music business, unlocking the secrets to exploding your music career, presented by In the Key of Success. I'm your host, Cheryl B. Engelhardt. The conversations you're about to hear are between our special guest and participants of my MX4 course, the Marketing and Branding, Money-Making, Mentorship Mastermind for Musicians. They are singers, songwriters, composers, producers, and artists just like you, asking their burning questions of our experts while transforming their careers over 6 weeks. If you think this could be you, check out mx4course.com to schedule a free half-hour coaching call with me to see if we'd be a good fit. So, let's get started. We are back with J Chris Griffin talking about all things production and artistry and vocals, all the good stuff. So we're going to pick it up with a question from Jeb.
I actually have an actual question this time.
Sweet. I don't have to interpret for you. Love it.
What would you say, Chris, is the difference? How do you distinguish between something that is dated and something that is retro?
Oh, well, let me collect my thoughts on that. Dated doesn't have, it just kind of off the top of my head, and here we go. I'm going to maybe explore it while I talk it out. Mm-hmm. But dated has kind of this component of, well, two things. One, it's kind of played out, and you can kind of sense the staleness of the art. The other is that there are no layers to it anymore. Art has layers, and there's kind of like the surface layer that all the regular people are going to get, and then there's the deeper layers that more educated people are going to get, and so forth. And I would say the dated kind of leaves those layers behind. Retro, on the other hand, kind of pushes left at the right time, at the right moment. I'm doing, with an artist I'm working on now, this whole Motown/Western kind of thing with the baritone guitar and a lot of mono reverb and so forth. And it does sound, well, I wouldn't say dated, but it does call back to a certain date. But right now with Lana Del Rey and kind of this Amy Winehouse resurgence and a lot of the London Grammar stuff, it's kind of the thing. And for me, I think that's kind of how to distinguish between the two. One is kind of like interesting and cool, and then the other one is like, oh, well, I've certainly heard that before, and there's no interest or coolness to it. Does that help? I mean, does that answer your question?
Yeah, unfortunately, I missed about 30 seconds of the first thing you said because my video went out. But
replays. Yay.
I'll watch the replay.
There you go. Replays are awesome. I also think that dated, I agree with everything that Chris said, but when I hear something that's dated, it's almost like it's trying to not be dated. It's trying to be current, but it doesn't hit it for whatever production value reason. It's usually something technical and mixed.
Yes.
Something vintage or whatever, or retro, vintage. Retro is like, it's intentional. So I think there's an intentionality behind both of those, but that's just my take.
I think that's an amazing ad. I wouldn't have thought of that, but you're exactly right. One is, just to repeat what you just said, one is intentional, the other one is not.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, great question, Jeb. That's really specific. All right, Rudy, do you have another question for Chris?
Yeah, I was wondering, Chris, because I'm going to launch my own album, and I would like to invite some artists to feature in this album to sing with me.
Oh, good, yeah.
And I see that you have a lot of experience with artists and a lot of relationships with them. And I'm wondering, like, how open do you think they would be if they are already successful to collaborate with a new artist that doesn't have much? It's only about my music and if they like it, and I don't know if that works that way.
I'm not sure that it works that way either. Obviously, you can imagine if your music just slams and it's like, oh my gosh, you are so the next thing. Well, they'd probably be into it. If you're trying to collaborate with somebody on the level, let's just say like, I don't know, Katy Perry or John Legend or somebody up there, depending on who does the introduction, they might be into it. For example, if you have a lawyer and it's the same lawyer they have, Well, you could have him mention something and oh yeah, well, he's represented by you. You're playing the same game I'm playing. Sure. Yeah. Where's this guy? Can I hear some of his music? But I'm not sure that they're going to exit their own game to help you in yours. I'm just not sure that that's how it works. Some people would certainly be happy to do that. But at I'm not going to say at the top levels, because all of us, we go through like, A list, B list, and then way down to like E list, and then back up to B list for a while, and then maybe A list again, and then maybe we retire at D list. It kind of goes in a wave. We don't all stay at A list once we get there. It's a rise and fall, and then a rise and a fall, and then maybe another rise and fall before you get out of this life. But my perception is those at the top don't want to get out of that game until they have to. And even those kind of on the B and the C list, I don't know. It's kind of tough unless they're kind of like altruistic and giving. I think the way to get somebody good to guest on your record is to get your lawyer behind you, or your agent behind you, or your publishing company behind you. And if you're not on that level, work on that first and get somebody at the top of their game at your level to guest on it. It's only going to help, because they can also get their fans going. They can also post it for you and have all of that, all those numbers coming in. Without knowing the game you're playing, I would say get the best at your level or get your lawyer involved. That's what I would say. Cheryl, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I was thinking, my last record was all duets, and there were people that I had wanted to write with. There were people that I had written with that I loved writing with. And it was a whole spectrum of people. And honestly, I used the perfect pitch when I wrote all those emails and made an opportunity for them. I made it really, really, really easy for them to say yes. I had the session booked in their city, had the song ready to go already. They could listen to it. They could listen to my demo of the vocal. So they had to do no work except maybe listen to part of the song. And I said, listen, I have this engineer in your area ready to go. You just go, some of them recorded remotely. So they needed the track without the vocals on it. I had that ready to go. So I made it really easy for them. And it didn't take weeks of coordinating to have it work. So that was one thing. I think the easier it is, yes, they have to like the song. The other thing is I know that you're doing a Latin album, right? Or it's got Latin feel, Rudy? Or Latin pop? What was the genre?
Yes, a lot of it is in Spanish, but the music is not what people understand from Latin music. It's just rock.
Just rock. Okay, cool. Yeah. So, I'm pop and singer-songwriter pop, and I reached out to a friend of a friend who I knew was a really great rapper. And I was like, let's see if I can get in a room with him, have him write a lyric. So he has some, I don't know if he wrote a lyric or not. Maybe I wrote the lyrics. Either way, he did some improvisation stuff, and we sort of figured out how to go outside of my norm. So maybe you're not calling rock guys. Maybe you're calling a cello player. Maybe you're calling, there might be someone else who might be like, oh, I normally do classical music and cello stuff. It would be really cool to be on a rock album. So I think that might also add another dimension and an opportunity for them to sort of get out of their box. So that's all I would add. I don't know.
Instrumentalists, I find, are a lot more receptive than lead vocalists. In fact, you could pretty much get anybody that you admire to play an instrument on your record. One of my friends one time, he was like, I love Dennis Chambers, who at that time and even now is kind of one of the most badass drummers that anybody would know. He played with Parliament. He played with Prince. He played with the Gap Band. And then, he went on to play with Michael Brecker. And he's just the man. And so he got Dennis Chambers to play on his record just because he paid him. And Dennis was in town. And again, he made it really easy. He was like, you're here. I've got this session booked on Sunday. You're not leaving till Monday. How about doing a session with me? And it worked. And it was amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the making it easy, but that's a really good question. It's what are vocalists? And if I get asked to be on someone else's project, I usually say yes. So, you never know. So you guys that was really diverse questions. I want to ask one question that I know I hear a lot from musicians, and I'm always guessing, but because we have a producer on the call, I figured let's ask this question. So Chris, when you're working with an artist, whether it's vocal, I know if it's a vocal lesson, then that's just lesson, there's an hourly rate, but the deal is always such a source of confusion. I think one of the reasons that a lot of musicians hold back in getting involved with hiring a producer, because they imagine that it's going to cost them thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. So what are some deals that you do when you're working with an artist on a couple songs or a record or an EP or something, both as a vocalist and as a producer, that you've worked out that feel good for you and the artist? What do some of those look like? Because I know there are a lot of different ones.
Help me clarify, like a monetary deal or?
Yeah, like what's the, like, do you, because I get this question a lot, like how should I be paying a producer? How much publishing should I give them, or master record? Like what share, like how does that work so that it feels good for you?
There are two main ways that I've found producers work. I don't do one of them, but one of the ways is the producer will kind of work for an affordable rate. And at the end of the day, maybe they own half, or maybe they own a quarter, or maybe they own a third, and you work that out and you bang it out.
Of the master?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And hopefully you bang it out before you even start work, because I still to this day see a lot of young producers kind of get in trouble because they get so excited to be with the artist. They go ahead and start work, and then they're halfway or maybe 3/4 of the way into it, and all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, you're going to claim rights to my song? Oh my gosh, no. And I see it all the time. And so what I just decided years ago was that most artists don't want to be hung up. And so I do an hourly rate. I do my main hourly rate, and I give a discount with certain kinds of hours. It's, it ends up being like a 20% discount after 4 hours booked all at the same time. And so it becomes affordable that way. But then I don't have any claim or anything or any points or any nothing to anything behind. And so the songs are yours, free and clear, good night, go away. So for me, the hourly rate makes everybody really, really happy. I get paid what I need to get paid to take home money to my wife and child. They get a free and clear offer, and we just work for until it's done. And, pretty much they're going to know, because I know how to budget these things over time. I'm going to know about how long it's going to take. And we work it out that way. So, and I just found that is, while I can't work with budget people anymore because they just can't afford the hourly rate, it does kind of clean up a lot of the problems that I find working with kind of legitimate artists of like, oh my gosh, these are my songs. I know what they sound like in my head. You're just kind of gonna help me find what that is. And I don't want to give you my song, or I don't want to give you any of my song. And while that may or may not be fair, depending on who's looking at it as a producer, I find that it just works really well for everybody involved.
That's an amazing way to approach it. I do know that a lot of producers are really focused on taking a cut of the recording, which makes sense because they are adding, if you're going from like a little guitar vocal demo and a producer comes in and makes it this Katy Perry sounding song, like that's a huge transformation. And I definitely think that that's worth paying for, whether upfront or down the line. So if that works for you, my question was what feels good for you and the artist. And I know that would feel good for an artist to not have any rights tied up, but if that feels good for you, Chris, that's an awesome way to talk about it. And I think that's the question to ask too. What feels good? Like what feels good for you and what feels good for me? And I see Gary jumping out of her seat with a follow-up question, I'm assuming in this conversation. What is it there, Gary?
Thank you. So we're talking about doing this for the artist. What about for the song? Let's say I have a phenomenal song, and I have a really good artist on it that is well known in the sync world, but not well known out in Radioland or whatever else. And I want this song to just be badass. I want to lay it on some movies or something like that. So what would you suggest? Do you do the same thing for songs that you do for artists, or would you bring an artist in?
Well, it depends. A lot of sync, and I do a lot of sync, but sometimes it just doesn't go, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you're going to bring me in, either it's going to be a situation like, all right, we're doing this on spec. Chris, you want to join 50-50 with me? Cheryl and I do that a lot.
All the time.
Yeah, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And I'll do that depending on who it is and what we're doing. And, on occasion, she's brought like a third artist that I really have not seen in a while and want to be with. And it's just kind of a nice hang, and we all have lunch and we work on the song. And it works. But I kind of have this thing, and I learned this when I was really just getting started, because the union in Nashville had this thing they called limited pressing. And what that was you could hire all the best musicians, and you could hire all the union guys, and you could hire everybody. And they didn't claim a piece to your record until it went over a certain amount. Now, they worked it out so that they knew you were going to invest around 10 grand, maybe 15 grand, maybe even 20 grand to your whole record. And these were in $1990, so it made sense to do about 20 grand. And so they didn't even come knock on your door with any problems until about a 30 grand gross receipt. Because they figured, okay, well, you need to make 10 grand, and then we'll come knock on your door again. And so I just kind of started looking at that, and I thought, that is really fair. That is so fair. You recoup your money, you make a little bit back, and then, okay, I think it's fair that we get another piece. If you're actually, somehow it hit, somehow it worked, and you were just kind of those 1 in a million that it just hit, and you made $3 million off it. Well, brothers and sisters, we need to blow that back. Yeah. And so I think I structure my deals kind of like that. I thought, all right, you hire me, it's all good. I'm not going to knock on your door until maybe you break 10 grand,
Okay, yeah. And I'm not just referring to, songs that come up or whatever. I'm referring to a song that's been vetted and that, I've only sent this song out to one place, and it was to Paramount, and they immediately took it, Mm-hmm. But I think this song could be so much better if it were better produced. So that's kind of what I'm thinking.
That your question brings to mind another question, but let me answer yours first. Mm-hmm. I think you would want to sit down case by case basis with the person that you choose and be like, all right, here's what I'm thinking. I think this could be amazing. I don't have all the money in the world, so I'm thinking this is fair. What do you think is fair? Can we work together? Is this a feel-good kind of thing? Will we both win? Is it going to work out? The last thing an artist wants to do, and even I think good producers, the last thing that anybody wants to have happen is you pay a bunch of money, it goes, and it works, and you make a crap ton of money out of it. And then the producer comes back and goes, well, I really kind of wrote about 3/4 of that. And, I think that's the artist's nightmare. Mm-hmm. And no good people want that to happen. And so I think in the pro world, at least, and I don't mean to sound elitist, but if anybody caught anybody at this level, I mean, Cheryl, if you had heard of anybody ever doing that, you would never work with them again. And it's kind of like that. If that ever got out about me that I did that, it would be devastating. And so,
and I think that the key takeaway to all of that is that you want it in writing, whatever it is, before you leave the studio. So, it's hard to do it before you write the song, but it's the thing that you want to do before you leave the room. So you have an agreement that says, and I do this with every person I've written with, even people that were way bigger and intimidating to me. I would just literally write down on a piece of paper,
one sheet,
song, 50-50, like we both sign it. And then it just acknowledges like, this is how we did it. And I had one situation actually with a songwriter who I've co-written a bunch with, and she took our song to a producer who ended up producing it way better. He actually changed the verses. They rewrote lyrics to work with the production. And she came back to me. She's like, listen, I know this was a 50-50 right, but he came in. So now there's a third person involved. We changed the song. We have a new version. And then we had to renegotiate, which is fine. But the fact that she had signed this little piece of paper before I left the room, I think told her that I was keeping track, and like it was on my mind, and it was the thing. I think if we hadn't signed anything, it would have been like, oh, whatever, and maybe I would never even know about it. So I think it just puts it in the conscious just to sign something. It's the same thing with money. You don't have to be wonky about it. You just need to be official and like business-like. Like, hey, this was a super great session. Let's just get this in writing, so we don't have to manage anything later, and have it ready to go. So I think that's what that comes down to.
So yeah, I think that's a great answer, Chris. Chris, this has been like the most diverse conversation I think we've ever had, from like talking about all the hats to vocal, like bringing out the artist and crying, to like deals with producers. This has been really, really helpful. So thanks so much for being here.
I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
All right, next week we're going to be talking with Julie Hurwitz, who is the Vice President of Commercial Sync at Cobalt, one of the biggest publishing companies in America. So get excited. This is going to be a fantastic conversation you do not want to miss. Please don't forget to rate and comment on iTunes and Stitcher Radio if you like this podcast. It's the best way to keep it going, get more subscribers, and continue to share this awesome information with the indie music community. Thank you, and we'll see you next time. All of the music on this podcast was provided by yours truly. The theme song is called Inevitably, and it was written with Cameron Ernst and produced by Joey Auck. If you're interested to find out more about my own composing and songwriting projects, go to cbemusic.com. If you're a musician looking to really get some results that you're psyched about in your music career, then head to inthekeyofsuccess.com, where I've created a bunch of different kinds of resources just for you. Key Conversations is sponsored in part by Bandzoogle. They make it easy to build a beautiful website for your music. Their step-by-step system gets you online in minutes, and you can choose from hundreds of mobile-friendly themes and customize them with their easy point-and-click editor. All the features you could possibly imagine for a professional website are built in. So, because you are a Key Conversations podcast listener, you get a special 3-month free trial just for you. Go to www.inthekeyofsuccess.com/resources and click on the Bandzoogle logo to access your free extended trial.